It was a nuts and bolts thing. It wasn't an hallucination, it was real.
I saw these creatures standing over me, and I just flipped out.
I don't want to find something on my body and say, gee, I wonder if aliens put it there. I want to know for sure.
In the next hour, we investigate ETs and close encounters, aliens and abductions. But first...
95% plus of the UFO databases, no matter where you go, are these odd balls of light.
The majority of UFOs are rapidly moving lights seen at night. They are not alien craft, or stars, helicopters, or aeroplanes. The explanation is found not in outer space, but literally down to Earth. Yet beware, not all is as it seems.
Project.
Well, I'm driving down to Southern Oregon. I got a phone call about a sighting that this young couple had recently. It appears that it is a light, an unusual light, behaving erratically in the night sky. What's unusual about this sighting is that it's lasted approximately 3 hours, which is considerably a long time for a UFO sighting. And I think the only way to determine exactly what they saw is to meet them, go over it step by step, make sure that all the details are covered, and of course what's most important is see what kind of people they are. Lance, can you show me how you looked at the object through the scope on your rifle?
Sure. I came out and I saw it. I kind of got it with my eye, and then I put my scope up and I looked straight in front of me like that, and I could see it, and then instantly when I got it in the scope, it bolted on me, and I had to kind of glimpse out and then bring it back, and I caught it again up a little bit higher to the right.
And I was like, come on, let me see, let me see, let me see. And he's like, holy crud, it's a jellyfish.
That's exactly what it resembled, was a jellyfish. I thought, whoa.
You mentioned to me that it was putting off what appeared to be beams of light or electrical energy. Can you tell me more about that?
It looked to me like lightning, you know, on a cloudy night when you see lightning rolling through the sky.
It was constantly throwing these beams off, like your hand. And
almost if it was sensing for something.
Yeah, it seemed like it was like taking pictures in a very technological fashion, more advanced than we know.
When I first got it in the scope, I saw it, and it arced. It went at an angle probably like that, and it instantly moved straight up at a right.
It was so erratic that...
I've never seen anything move that quick. Never in my life ever seen anything move that quick.
Right.
I mean, just that fast, and it was gone.
An aura of mysticism and menace hangs over the Yakima region in Washington state. It's the home of Bigfoot and other apparitions.
At Yakima, all varieties of the UFO experience have been recorded. Balls of light, what might appear to be spacecraft, unusual sounds, creatures, entities, beings, if you will, even what we might consider to be abductions. The most common unidentified flying object seen at Yakima is the ball of light or the sphere of light. These balls are typically orange in color or white in color and are seen hovering, moving slowly. They appear to be inquisitive. They, in some cases, have followed motorists in their cars. UFO sightings have been going on at Yakima at least 30 years by the written record, but there are a lot of strong indications that these objects have been seen over 50 years or more.
There's such a good record of sightings on the Yakima Reservation because fire lookouts have to log every unusual light in case it's a fire. They don't just see fire and smoke, they see balls of light in the air.
have seen roughly 100 lights, or maybe a few more or a few less over the years. I'd have to go back through my logbooks and count them up. I've been a lookout for 34 years, and this is all is my area, plus some of it over here isn't on my map that I'm still responsible for. And when I see a fire, I have to take a cross shot and then pin it down in a little spot. The lights that I've seen, oh, I've seen at least 100 different lights and objects.
In 1947, Yakima was the site of the world's first flying saucer report by pilot Kenneth Arnold. Flying on a search for a crashed aircraft, he saw a formation of 9 silver objects skipping like saucers over water. Were they alien spacecraft, or were they linked to the phenomena of balls of light? No one knows. In this eerie land, almost anything feels possible. Most sightings are reported by reliable eyewitnesses. For the first time, one of them describes a typical close encounter. Stella Washims has seen strange lights on many occasions.
I was home with my daughter. My husband had went off to, I think, a basketball game, took our 2 sons with him, and it started to get toward dusk. The sun was going down, and so I told my daughter to shut the drapes in the living room. And she was just partially closed the drapes, and she was standing there staring out the window. And I said, close the drapes. And she's standing there, and I said, what are you doing? And she says, I'm looking at all these airplanes out here. The dog was banging into the door, and he just like bowled past me. He just went and wedged himself under the table and stayed there. And I was really afraid, and, you know, he was more afraid of being outside than he was of me, you know, chasing him out of the house, and he never came in the house. It was different kinds. There was ones that were kind of triangular shaped, and then there was these white, orange type balls. But finally, you know, they were really too close for comfort.
Hotspots of strange lights show up throughout the world, from Yakima to Scandinavia, Australia and Britain. Security cameras at this shopping mall in northern England recorded a ball of light for 30 minutes. It drifted around the building and was captured on 3 cameras. What are the people at Yakima and elsewhere seeing? There are many possible explanations. This is the only alleged photograph of one suspect, ball lightning. It remains an enigma.
I think ball lightning is a good example of a natural phenomenon that is poorly understood. It's not observed very often. These are just dense concentrations of ionized air that hang together and can be basketball, soccer ball size, sometimes smaller. And they tend to float in the air. They've been known to go through closed windows. I don't think anybody really knows what people are seeing when they see big balls of light. As far as we know, these are not ball lightning. And of course, people see them in clear blue skies, totally unassociated with thunderstorms.
The vast majority of balls of light, 95% plus of the UFO databases, no matter where you go, are these odd balls of light. So that's why we primarily analyze them.
Michael Persinger called in an expert on earthquakes.
What I find interesting is to try to associate these balls of light with earthquakes, because we know that large earthquakes generate very bright lights in the sky.
In 1966, during an earthquake in Japan, this glow lit up the night sky. Persinger and Durr set out to discover if earthquakes were generating their balls of light. They found one strange UFO cluster in Colorado. In 1963, hundreds of millions of gallons of toxic waste from a munitions factory was pumped down a 2-mile deep well. Unfortunately, the fluids lubricated a fault system. Over the 5 years of active injection, 1,500 earthquakes were recorded.
You have a fault zone where the rocks are pressed hard together, but if you put some lubrication on that surface, then they're going to slip. Well, we're putting a lot of pressure into the ground, and the ground is cracking and it's bending. And every time you have some sort of strain, you have an elastic wave that's radiated out from it. You can think of a rubber band that's stretched, and you can come along with a pair of scissors and cut it, and there's all this energy released as the pieces fly apart.
The lubrication created a knock-on effect. A slow ripple of minor tremors moved away from the injection point. It traveled at speeds of between 30 and 80 miles per month. And just before the quakes reached a district, there was a rash of UFO lights reported.
So it would be fluid injection, strain, UFO reports, earthquakes, in that repetitive cycle.
UFO lights and earthquakes are linked. Light can be created by rocks.
Triboluminescence means light produced by friction, the rubbing together of two surfaces. Many minerals produce this phenomenon, but one of the best known is quartz. And so I have some quartz here with which I will demonstrate this.
This is the first ever film of the release of triboluminescent energy by rocks. There is another possibility. When the Earth moves, the enormous forces crush the crystals that form the rocks. Pulverizing crystals by pressure can release light.
Piezoelectrics literally means pressure electricity. And when we stress or scratch or compress rock crystals such as quartz, it is found that there is a generation of charge within the crystal, and sometimes this can lead to the evolution of light, tiny sparks and flashes within the crystal itself.
Alan Mills can demonstrate this by crushing almost any crystal, in this case sugar cubes. Crushing rock under much greater pressure in an earthquake zone will do the same. In complete darkness, our cameras catch the flash of light released from the sugar cube. But there's a problem. No one knows how this energy could travel from deep in the earth to become a floating ball of light. But why are lights seen in advance of any tremor underground? The mystery remains unsolved. If lights are linked to tremors, does this explain the UFOs seen at Yakima? Persinger and Durr found that the lights do appear above local fault lines.
This is per month. The faces, there we go. These are UFO reports along one direction, a series coming in the other direction, and then a quake should be predictable right in the center. There it is, the asterisk. We found that these balls of light would suddenly become more intense and more frequent during the same months when there was an increase in earthquake activity in the vicinity of the reservation.
Dancing balls of light are still not fully explained, but it seems clear that the answer will be found inside the Earth. However, Michael Persinger and John Durr's research into earthquakes does not explain all close encounters with UFOs.
The tectonic strain theory of UFOs has been designed to try to answer the question, why so many of these glowing balls of light seen at Yakima? But the problem is that mixed in with sightings of balls of light have been other objects. There's also been close encounters.
We deliberately exclude close encounters types of sightings.
What might appear to be spacecraft, there appear to be abductions.
What do you want with me? What do you want with me? What do you want with me?
In In the last 15 years, tens of thousands of people have come forward to describe their experiences at the hands of alien abductors. They recount tales that range from the tranquil to the terrifying. Messages of goodwill, horrific medical examinations, and the removal of fetuses and hybrid babies. People have been abducted whilst driving or when secure in their beds. One of the most famous and convincing cases occurred more than 20 years ago in Arizona.
My name is Travis Walton. I'm presently employed as a purchasing agent. I was working in these woods as a tree sawyer back in 1975.
Well, my name is Michael Rogers, and in 1975 I was a logger right here on this spot. I was the crew boss of a group of guys, of which Travis Walton was a member. And today, that's what I'm still doing. I'm still doing the same kind of work.
We just finished up, loaded our chainsaws and stuff in the back of the truck when we spotted a strange light coming through the trees.
Just light coming through the trees.
The longer I looked, the stranger it was. One of the guys in the back yelled out, "It's a spaceship."
Travis jumped out of the truck to go get a closer look at it.
As I hurried towards it, I noticed that it wasn't moving away.
It was a large glowing object, a disc-shaped object, a UFO.
A disc, a metallic disc hovering there less than 100 feet away.
The color of the object itself was sort of a golden color, like the color of metal out of a blast furnace, you know, the color of steel.
You know, this was not some little hazy ball of glowing gas off in the distance. This was, I mean, it was a clearly defined mechanical object.
It just struck me as being quite perfect and quite beautiful.
It kind of had a sort of a rumbling sort of effect. It kind of like shook you inside, had a power to it. But it was kind of like almost below the threshold of hearing.
At one point there where the thing started moving and started making more noise, and it started wobbling and it kind of raised up.
And the guys in the truck were yelling at me, "Stop, what are you doing?" You know, and get away from there and all this stuff.
And this thing by this time was making a lot of strange sounds.
And so I was having second thoughts about what I was doing.
He crouched down behind a log.
I just dove for cover.
You could see the truck shaking, and I could feel it through the steering wheel. It was just shaking like this. And that's when things got really hairy.
I made up my mind right then, I'm getting out of here. And so I raised up to go.
This beam came out of this thing like a bright bluish beam of energy of some kind, and it struck him in the chest and head area.
And wham, something hit me.
Just momentarily, it was like blinding. I couldn't see for like a second. It just was like an explosion going off in front of him. It blew him back.
It felt a little bit like a physical blow. It felt a little bit like an electric shock, too.
And he landed way back over here.
I just blacked out.
And that's when I hit the gas. We realized that we had left Travis here. He was probably hurt. From every appearance, he was hurt. If he wasn't dead, he was certainly hurt. We all got out of the truck at one point and kept discussing about it, kept looking back over here and talking. And after, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes of this conversation, we finally decided we better go back.
I regained consciousness very slowly. I was kind of in and out. I didn't know where I was. I was very disoriented. I was just in and out. I eventually kind of remembered what had happened, you know, walking up to the object and being hit by something. So I kind of surmised that I'd been hurt and that they had taken me to a hospital, and that's where I was.
Took a flashlight and shine it in the road down here and up in the clearing. We didn't see right off the bat. Travis isn't laying there where he'd fallen. He wasn't there.
There was an object lying across my chest. The light above me was sort of a rectangular fixture. I was lying on a hard surface. It seemed very hot and humid. But, you know, the main sensation was just this pain, this overpowering pain.
They conducted a 4-day search the next day and for the next 3 days after that. A very extensive search all over this entire area, which expanded out and out and out, and large area. A lot of men on horseback, dogs, a lot of men on foot, vehicles, helicopters, airplanes, you know. Couldn't find any trace of him. Never a trace of Travis. Never a trace of Travis. Never a trace of Travis.
When I finally got where I could focus my eyes, so I could hear the sounds of movement around me. I knew there was someone there, but I just, at first, assumed it was doctors, you know, people working on treating me. But when I finally got where my vision cleared, I saw these creatures standing over me, and I just flipped out. It was, you know, I instantly knew that I wasn't in a hospital, and I just flipped out. They came towards me. I started screaming at them, and I grabbed an object and swung it at them, screaming. They stopped all simultaneously, sort of extended their hands, and then all at once they all three turned and left the room. And there in the doorway is what I took immediately to be a person, a human being. He took me quickly down this hallway into a room where there were some other people waiting, people who looked like him. They led me over to this table and started to put me on this table, and you know, I started to have major misgivings about, you know, was I being rescued, or what was really going to happen to me here. And one of them put a mask over my face. So it sort of looked like an oxygen mask. And I tried to grab it away, and I managed to get my hand on it, but I couldn't pull it away before I lost consciousness. The next thing I knew, I woke up. I came to quickly. And it was cold and dark. And I looked up, and there was a light above. And I saw a craft hovering above me, and it just shot up into the sky. I looked around. I was lying next to a highway.
Travis was missing for 5 days.
It's a mystery to me. You know, I can't understand what was going on there.
What makes abductions hard to dismiss is the close similarity of the experiences described.
Even from the very earliest UFO reports, people noticed that there were considerable similarities in the stories. What I found from this comparative study was that there were a great deal of similarity in the stories. Most start out with a capture, go to examination, and on very rare occasions, a kind of spiritual experience. There's also a great deal of similarity in the content, the description of the beings, the descriptions of the ship itself, the feelings and sensations and strange effects that people report. These are all extremely similar from one story to another. The sequence of events staying so regular is quite peculiar, given the fact that these are lengthy stories, they're quite bizarre. They would be excellent opportunities for people to simply rearrange some of the episodes or some of the events within an episode, but that very seldom ever happens.
Where do these alien kidnappers come from? They report their home planets from various star systems and distant suns. They include the Pleiades, Betelgeuse, Barnard's Star, and Zeta Reticuli. They're all light years from Earth. No signs of life have been found emanating from them. Some aliens bring messages of goodwill. Others come to harvest our genetic material. Abductee Steve Neal has mixed feelings about his experiences.
I have, in my opinion, definitely had contact with something non-human, independent, very smart, and it appears has a great concern for my soul personally. But when you get abducted, as it's called, and put on a table and reduced to nothing more than a piece of flesh, and you have needles put in you and you're scared to death, it really gets your attention. What I'm doing here is I'm illustrating various scenes that are going to be in a film that I'm producing about the so-called abduction phenomenon, or as I like to call it, the visitor phenomenon. It has a less threatening sort of connotation to it. In fact, that's all I've been doing for the last year and a half is gray alien stuff, and aliens, and Roswell debris for reenactments of Roswell pieces done by Borderline, and sightings and encounters and all these different shows. It's kept me very, very busy. And so I've been doing sort of accurate portrayals of the way the beings are actually seen. And these beings you see here are actually based on information that I obtained from working with a hypnotherapist about 4 years ago.
A Florida insurance company now offers an alien abduction policy. However, to pay out, it demands greater proof than recalling an experience under hypnosis. And why do the various alien races choose different parts of the world to fly to?
One peculiarity of the stories, one element that would suggest there might be some cultural differences, is that while in North America, the small gray aliens have been the most common, in Britain, the commonest alien has been the tall, blonde, Nordic type. In South America, you tend to get more of a variety of aliens.
Alien abductions are not as straightforward as they seemed. Does the answer lie in outer space, or is it all in the mind? The brain is an electromagnetic organ. There are billions of electrical pulses whizzing around it every second. Mess with those signals, and all kinds of strange things can occur. Could alien abductions be linked to the energy that creates UFO lights?
The question of the relationship between Earth lights, luminous phenomena, and abduction experiences is, I think, only marginally overlapping. The vast majority of these balls of light, which are seen at a distance, are physical phenomena tied to strain within the Earth's crust. The very few cases where people rush up to the light and have very predictable experiences, those individuals are indeed being stimulated by the balls of light. But the recent case of the abduction phenomenon, where allegedly millions of people have been visited in their bedrooms, it is much more a neuroscience problem than a geophysical one.
Michael Persinger has built a chamber to test his theory. It's completely soundproofed. The subject sits in darkness, blindfolded. A weak magnetic field is generated in a special helmet. A computer controls the field. Persinger varies the shape of the electromagnetic wave transmitted through the brain. It generates different types of mystical experience.
The kinds of things that people report in the chamber when their experiences are amplified by applying these complex, weak magnetic fields would be feelings of moving through a tube, feelings of floating through a cave, feelings of being detached, feeling another mind speaking through theirs. The sensations of spinning and of having body vibrations as if something is moving through the body. The experiences of sudden memories, intense memories from childhood. Now, they may not be memories from childhood, but that's how they are labeled. Sometimes we have had cases where a person feels that they may be dying and they can see the white light. And we can produce that with a certain kind of magnetic field pattern. These experiences are probably very common. Probably of the 6 billion brains that exist on this planet, the majority of us have had something like that. But we have culture that tells us how to explain it. So if you're in a laboratory with people you trust, then the experience of a sense of presence, even if it's aversive and frightening, will be looked at in that context. As one subject said, I know there was no one in the chamber with me because I saw the door closed or I felt the door closed, but yet I knew there was someone in the room with me. Another subject felt this presence. They felt something tugging on their leg. They felt something playing with the genitals, but they knew that couldn't be. So they labeled it as an experience that they attributed to the field because they knew they were in an experiment. But if you took the same experience when you're by yourself late at night in your bedroom, and the cultural label is, it's an alien abduction, how would you interpret it?
Professor Persinger can create apparitions using weak magnetic fields. But how can they be generated outside the laboratory? We are all bathed in strong electromagnetic radiation. It comes from sources all around us. Paranormal investigator Albert Button has linked alien abduction experiences to electrical fields. Albert researches the stray electromagnetic radiation created by high-tension power lines, radio waves, and other sources of energy. Abductees may be particularly sensitive. Albert has investigated 50 cases. The abductees share one factor in common.
Almost invariably, I have found that these abductees have something called a major electrical event where they've been struck by lightning, or been near lightning, or have had major electrocution, and this has changed their bodies permanently.
I have had an electric shock. It wasn't one which took me to hospital or anything, but it did throw me across the room. I had the electric shock before I had any contact with so-called aliens.
If you look at these people, they almost invariably have a long history of strange experiences, sometimes reaching back to childhood. And their abduction experience is just one in a whole family of experiences that they've had throughout their lives.
UFO experiences, aliens, bendy men, psychic things happening.
But these aren't ordinary people. These are people who are hypersensitive to these fields. These fields don't affect most people.
Electrical phenomena, television switching itself on and off, the video playing to itself for half an hour.
If they then go and live in what's called electromagnetic hotspot, they will start to have all kinds of sensations. They will suddenly see a bright light, which is a stimulation of the visual cortex.
Within this vicinity, there are microwave transmitters, radio transmitters, electrical substations. We seem to have everything virtually.
They will have hallucinations, which is stimulation of the temporal lobe. All different kinds of parts of the brain are sometimes kicked into action.
There's other experiences like allergies. There's tingling sensations under the skin. So you've got to look a lot deeper. You can't just look at the aliens.
They're dreamlike very often, these experiences. And researchers who are very keen on impressing the extraterrestrial aspect on this will filter out all of these absurdities. Trolls piloting spaceships, garden gnomes leading witnesses into enclosed areas, a dog lying in a carpeted flying saucer. These things occur over and over again, and it's quite obvious to me that the source of this imagery comes from the human unconscious rather than from Zeta Reticuli.
I genuinely believed that the experience had happened. It took me about 2 years to come round to actually being logical about it and looking at it in a logical way.
This is an environmental health issue, and in fact, alien abduction experiences are just a very small part of a much broader issue, which is electromagnetic pollution.
Nearly all accounts of abductions are recalled under hypnosis. But how reliable is hypnosis? We all have strong memories of our past. However, false memories, even without hypnosis, can be created if the subject wants to please their therapist. They recall what they think the hypnotist wants to hear. Even without hypnosis, as events fade and are dimly remembered, we create new memories to fill in the gaps, reinventing the past. It's all too easy to create false memories. A Canadian psychologist gave volunteers what they thought were personality tests. The psychologist used positive feedback to implant the idea that they saw a mobile on the day that they were born. He told them that they were exceptional personalities and that he suspected this was due to their brains being stimulated by the mobile in their cot. He had no idea if it was true, nor did his subjects. One group was simply asked what their first memory was. None of them could recall a mobile. Another group were regressed to their first memory using hypnosis or simple relaxation techniques. Almost half of them reported that they had real memories of a mobile on the first day of life. But babies' memories of events don't begin to function for at least the first 3 months of life. Memory is not a videotape. The vast majority of abductions are recalled under hypnosis by people who were alone at the time. However, what remains is much harder to explain as all in the brain. There are cases of multiple abductions or additional eyewitnesses like Travis Walton's horrific experience, or the case of Police Sergeant Alan Godfrey, who encountered a flying saucer whilst on patrol.
As I got near to this object, it became apparent to me that what I was looking at wasn't something that I would normally find in the early hours of the morning in Todmorden, you know.
3 other police officers reported a UFO in the sky.
It was a nuts and bolts thing. It wasn't an hallucination, it was real. This object was 20 foot wide. It's 14 feet high. It's diamond shaped. The bottom half of it was rotating. The top half was stationary. It had a bank of dark windows, or could have been paneling.
Under hypnosis, he described his abduction by aliens.
Now, in this room, there is a very tall humanoid, for want of a better word. He's about 6 foot to 6'6", very tall, thin, with a beard. He had a skull cap on and he had this white gown on. What happens then is I'm asked to get on this bed. And these horrible little things come. They are a lamp-shaped head with black, dark eyes. That's the best way I can describe them. And there was about 7 or 8 of them. I know that night what I saw was real. It was damn real.
Is this close encounter a false memory created by hypnosis?
The actual account which Alan gives under hypnosis is very, very compelling, because when you fit together the jigsaw of what he remembers consciously and can tell us consciously with what he can only remember under hypnosis, it ties together. For instance, at the beginning of Alan's connection with the UFO, consciously, he tells us that he thought it was a bus. He realized on second looking again that it wasn't a bus, and he decided to drive on and have a look at it. Under hypnosis, he says it's a bus. It's not a bus.
It was. It's not a bus.
And you can see an expression on his face of incredulity. He does not believe what he's looking at.
It's like a flying saucer.
A lot of people think that Alan Godfrey has been led by the hypnotist or influenced by the hypnotist or myself. This is not true. All the doctors I have used, none of them, in fact, believe in UFOs. They're intrigued as to the witness's experience. They don't have an explanation for it. But they basically do not believe in UFOs. These doctors, if you would, stand between me and the witness.
There's a light, shining light.
Apart from the fact that it's the doctors who carry out most of the interrogation without using leading questions, on at least 2 occasions, Alan Godfrey has rebelled and refused to answer any further questions. On one occasion, he almost jerked himself out of hypnosis and said, "I'm not answering you. I haven't to answer that."
I haven't to answer that.
Why haven't you to answer that?
Because when I think about it, it hurts.
It has to be said that at the time that Alan Godfrey had his experience and underwent hypnosis, the accounts of alien abductions were virtually, if not completely, unknown in the United Kingdom. I had certainly never heard of them. I don't know of anybody who had. Hypnosis seems to be the only tool, at least it's the only tool that I am aware of, to probe missing and confused memories. It's not a foolproof method, but if it hadn't been used, the abduction side of all the experiences of amnesiacs all over the world would never have come to light.
These are robots. Mm-hmm. They're not human.
I honestly believe that what happened to me on hypnosis really happened.
Is there any other evidence to support these reports? Abductees report strange marks, scars, and bruises.
I will wake up with injuries to my body I can't explain. I can't explain them. I don't want to find something on my body and say, gee, I wonder if aliens put it there. I want to know for sure. So when I go to bed, I'm very keen on what's what on my body. So to wake up with a 4-inch long cut out of nowhere underneath your long johns on your leg that burns is a big question mark. And this stuff happens to me fairly often. The other thing that happens, of course, you get these triangular marks. You hear about them so much. And it's real. People are really getting these. I get them. And what's fascinating about it is that they're identical to the ones the other individuals are getting. You look at my photographs of body injury, it looks like everybody else's.
There are also reports of implants. One abductee even paid for an operation to have one removed. Jesse Long believes he was abducted as a child. Something was implanted in his leg.
Oh, you're just feeling twisting?
But it still hurts. They don't seem concerned with me while I'm on the table screaming and yelling and wanting to get away, because these experiences are not pleasant at all. They're some of the most frightening things you could ever experience.
There it is. There's your
Wow.
triangular shard.
Cheese.
There we are. If you like, I'd lay it on the skin like that next to it. Let me blot off the blood.
This is a photograph taken of me sitting on the porch. You can actually see the scoop mark in my leg where the object was put in. The object always hurt for those 34 years. I mean, I had to wear my socks below them. Here's the big blunt end. And then we have the very tip of it, which is now here. So that when they're laid together, it forms a triangular shaped shard.
Electron micrographs show that it's only common glass. It contains no chemical elements alien to our planet.
It's silicon and magnesium and zinc and silver and calcium. Just recently I had it analyzed further. They found titanium. In addition to that, they've also found sulfur, 24% sulfur.
Are abductions happening for certain? Are they just figments of the imagination? There is no hard evidence.
I have no concrete proof. I don't have a cigarette lighter from the spaceship, you know. But I think that's going to be something that, if it happened, if somebody said they had the cigarette lighter from the spaceship, I'd be very skeptical right off, because I know the way this thing works, and they're not going to let us have anything to prove this is going on until they want us to.
I know that night What I saw was real. It was damn real. Now, what I don't know is what was it and where did it come from?
It's a mystery to me. You know, I can't understand what was going on there.
And they always paralyze me because they know if they don't, I'll kill everyone I can get my hands on.
Why do they choose certain people? What do the aliens want?
I don't really know for sure, but I do know that this presence, this non-human intelligence, plans, if I'm to believe it, to make contact with every single last human soul in this world before they're finished with what they're doing. So it's better than landing on the White House lawn, I think. And it's certainly more effective.
Do alien saucers crash in the United States?
It didn't look like an airplane, didn't look like a missile.
Do alien probes come down in Siberia?
Unlike most UFO cases, this one should be and can be resolved.
Do alien craft land in England?
I observed the craft probably for about 15 minutes on the ground.
Does the US government have proof of alien life? The United States, June 1947. A private pilot near Mount Rainier. He's the first to see unusual craft traveling at hitherto unknown speeds. Hundreds of reports of flying discs follow. Half a century later, the greatest mystery is solved.
Many people were told to keep their mouths shut about the things they saw.
A lot of us were still in shock and in disbelief what we found.
The true story is yet to be told.
I believe that there was a flying out of space object.
An alien saucer crash. The crew lies dying. The military cover it up. In the two museums at Roswell, New Mexico, the truth is on show. We are not alone. We can see for ourselves. We are the first to learn the government's biggest secret. And if they say it's not true, well, they would, wouldn't they? Encounters with extraterrestrials, abductions, reports of spaceships. Over the last 50 years, these are multiplying to industrial proportions. Not mere childish gullibility, but a genuine hunger to know if there is something outside ourselves fuels our curiosity. Is there life elsewhere? And does it visit us? The incident at Roswell is the most crucial case of all time for UFO believers. If the truth were out in the open, they say, it would provide the answers. No other case is heading so clearly to become a myth. No other case gathers so many new witnesses and fresh testimony on its journey. Yet its recorded beginnings are simple. Tinfoil in the farmlands of the southern state of New Mexico. An area about 200 yards in diameter with bright wreckage made up of rubber strips, tin foil, a rather tough paper, and sticks. That's what farmer Mac Brazel finds on the Foster Ranch on June the 14th. So unimportant does he think it, that it isn't until July the 7th that he reports it, while visiting Roswell to sell wool. Sheriff Wilcox alerts the local field of the Army Air Force, home of the only unit in the world equipped with the atomic bomb. The field's intelligence officer, the late Jesse Marcel, and others collect remnants from the ranch and return to base. The press officer issues an excited release, quickly taken up by the local media.
The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken, and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters.
The press release stated, in essence, that we had in our possession a flying disc, and that Major Marcel, our base intelligence officer, was flying it to Fort Worth to turn over to General Ramey, who is the commanding general of the 8th Air Force.
The fear is that discs are Soviet aircraft. The Air Force may be carrying a new enemy secret weapon. General Ramey seeks urgent identification. He sends for a weather expert.
I was on duty at Fort Worth in the base weather station. The phone rang and it was General Ramey. And he said, get your ass over here as fast as you can. If you have a car, drive over here. If you don't have a car, take the first car with keys in it and come over here or walk over here. And so I just responded, yes, sir, and away I went.
The weather officer recognizes the remains of unusual specialist equipment for tracking winds. A radio wind or ray wind balloon and reflector, or target.
When I got in there, the inside of the room, the general was in there, and Marcel was there assuring me that this was a flying saucer he'd picked up in New Mexico. I told him that it was a ray wind balloon and a ray wind target, and if it wasn't, I'd eat it without salt or pepper. And I said, there is no doubt in my mind what that is.
The general's photo opportunity pooh-poohs the secret weapon theory. Press and public interest drain away.
The next morning when I picked up the newspaper, I saw that we didn't have a flying disc. All we had was a weather balloon. That was the end of it. It was forgotten.
Forgotten, but gone to a better life. The journey into legend begins. A high-tech folk tale. One which for some can never be proved or disproved. Concealed by the government. They don't want us to know the secret. They have alien technology. The beans are spilt 30 years later by a chance remark to a UFO writer.
In 1978, it was at a television station, waiting for a late reporter when the manager of the station, who was giving me coffee and a little embarrassed because the reporter was late, said, the guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel. Who's he? Oh, well, he handled pieces of the wreckage of one of those saucers you're interested in when he was in the military. That got my attention.
The writer's attention results in the truth coming out. What Major Marcel remembers with certainty is no aircraft, nor a weather balloon, nor a missile. It's something else. On July the 2nd, lightning strikes a spaceship over Roswell. Bits fall off nearby. The actual crash is on the plains of San Agustin, 100 miles away. There is a wreck and dead aliens. They're found by archaeologists and a soil engineer. The military arrive and make them leave. Oh, and Brazel lied. he couldn't find the debris before July the 3rd at the ranch. The material makes a deep impression on Major Marcel and on his son, then aged 11.
My first memory of that time in 1947 was being awakened by my father very late at night, maybe after midnight, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, "I have something I want to show to you." So I went out to the car to help him bring some boxes of this material in, dumped it out over the kitchen floor so we could examine it. And it turns out there was a lot of metallic debris. There's some I-beam material, some foil-like material, some black plastic debris. And he said he thinks this is part of what was then called a flying saucer. When I held one of these I-beams up to the light so the light would reflect across the inner surface, I noticed there was some writing of some kind. It looked like hieroglyphics, and it was all inside the inner surface of the I-beam itself. The symbols themselves look like geometric forms, like circles, balls, triangles, truncated pyramids, various configurations like that. Years after this event occurred, I heard my father talk of how he had people try to bend it with a sledgehammer. Even as thin material as this appeared to be, apparently it could not be dented even with a 16-pound sledgehammer. I heard my father talk about trying to burn it with a cigarette lighter, and he said it would not burn. He tried it to see if it would shrivel up like tinfoil would under a cigarette lighter, and apparently it did not.
By mistake, or to divert attention from the site, the press release is put out. To avoid panic and hide the government's possession of alien technology, the story is covered up. The truth is out, but is it the whole truth? Where are the aliens now? And the wreckage? Is it the ultimate secret weapon? The story wins many friends. People can't stand yet another government conspiracy. In 1987, new details are leaked in hoax documents masquerading as a briefing for President-elect Eisenhower. They tell entirely different events. Different time, different place. Forget the lightning. On July the 2nd, a reconnaissance saucer malfunctions. Forget San Agustin. The crash is at Corona. 2 miles away, 4 human-like aliens are found. All traces are removed. The cover-up is extensive. A call from Washington warns the local radio station to stop covering the story or be shut down. It threatens the broadcasters.
You didn't see anything, you haven't heard anything, you don't know anything about this. And let me assure you that we will monitor you to be sure every broadcast that you make, that if you mention it, you're in big trouble. And furthermore, if a report comes to us that you have violated this agreement that we have made, we will tell you that we're not going to wait for a federal communications deal with warnings and all of that stuff. That, as of that moment, we are going to cancel your license to operate.
3 versions so far and no rest for a myth on the make. Want to shift some hooks? How about a new witness, say someone who knows what happened to the aliens? Make sure you include most of the details of all previous versions. Don't forget to add a few tidbits about those space-age alien materials. There's no silencing the UFO busters. In 1991, a 4th version appears. The saucer lands briefly on the Foster Ranch on July the 2nd, takes off, gouges the ground for 150 feet, leaves wreckage. It comes to rest 2 miles away. Mac Brazel finds alien debris with almost magical properties. He shows it to his neighbors.
This piece of material that he brought, we examined it real carefully. It looked like it was a little larger than a pencil, and it was about 6 or 7 inches long. It was a light tan color, looked like a lightweight wood, but you couldn't burn it or cut it. Mac said that some of the other material looked like a aluminum foil, but when you'd crush it in your hand, it would straighten back out. There were no creases at all. And there was some tape that, or some part of it that had some printing on it. He said in a purplish pink ink. He said it wasn't like Japanese or the way he described it, it was more like hieroglyphics or something, you know, it was kind of pictures. It wasn't flowers or printing as we knew anything.
At the second site, 2 miles away, 4 alien bodies and a crashed saucer are found. The military remove all traces and ring up the local undertaker come ambulance man. He's a brand new witness.
The mortuary officer from the Roswell Army Airfield called and said he would like to ask me a few questions. He wanted to know, did we have, what size baby caskets hermetically sealed? Were they 3'6" or 4 foot? You want to know how many that we have in stock and how long would it take us to get more?
Later, Glenn Dennis drives an injured airman out to the base in his ambulance.
When I got to the infirmary where I usually park, there was 3 old field ambulances there where I usually park. Naturally, I looked in and I saw a lot of debris there. It looked like some kind of a crash debris of some kind, not particularly an airplane crash, but it was some kind of debris. Then I noticed there was a piece that looked like the end of a canoe that was about 3.5 feet that came up to a point like a canoe, and then I noticed on the outer edges that it looked like some kind of hieroglyphics.
His emergency over, Glenn passes by the hospital laboratory.
We probably hadn't gone over 10 feet, and this door opened, and it was a nurse that I knew that I had worked with before. And she had a towel over her face, and she was gasping, I think, or maybe crying, I'm not sure, but I know she was gasping for breath. And she did see me, and she said, Glenn Dennis, get out of here as fast as you can because you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Immediately following her were 2 gentlemen that also had a towel over their face, and they were gasping very much so. They went on across the hall with her and went into the door. It wasn't for just a few minutes, and here comes 2 PMPs, and they said, take this gentleman off the base, you drive him back. Don't let him drive, make sure he's off the base, and you drive the ambulance yourself.
Dennis is removed on the orders of a menacing red-haired captain and a mean black sergeant. The next day, he meets the nurse. She's in a terrible state.
I've never seen anyone that she was as white as a ghost. Her hair was just all completely messed up. She was like scratching her face, and then she was just almost completely in total shock. Her story was that they were doing a partial autopsy. On one hospital gurney was a crash bag it was unzipped with 2 very mutilated small little bodies. It said very mutilated. And she said, for instance, there was a hand that was severed, and in a long forceps, they would turn the hand over, and they were describing it only 4 fingers. Small pads on each end of the fingers, and it looks like there's little miniature suction cups.
The further it goes, the more witnesses it grows. Just when you thought it might die down, fresh versions 5 and 6, more crash sites, more aliens, and more military policemen are all on the way. 1992, the War of the Words continues. July the 8th, this time, Saucer 1 crashes 75 miles from Roswell. Dead aliens, 4. 150 miles away, a second saucer is found by archaeologists. Oh, and new witnesses. ET body count, now 7. Plus 1 who wants to phone home. New players appear. At the first sight, a menacing figure, a red-haired colonel. At the second, two others, a red-haired captain and a black sergeant. Surely not the ones who kicked the mortician off the base. 1994, the millennium approaches. The 4th of July, two Franciscans record something crashing to Earth. Independence Day at last. The truth and the saucer come closer. Not at San Agustin, nor even at Corona. The doomed disc drops down just north of Roswell's museums. It's found by archaeologists, entirely different archaeologists. Enter an incredible eyewitness. He claims a secret mission took him to the crash site itself.
We got into several jeeps and some trucks and so on, went north, and we clipped the fence and went into the area, and that's where we saw this glow. We saw this craft, and it didn't look like an airplane, didn't look like a missile, and it was something that was just odd. The craft itself was close to almost a heel shape. I would say that it might have been about 15, 20 feet in length. It was kind of half open. One body was thrown up to the base of the arroyo. The other body was half in, half out. They were well-developed individuals, maybe around 5'8", 5'9". Very small nose, small ears. The eyes were round, fully round, not big. They were good-looking people, very good-looking people. Of course, a lot of us were still in shock, you know, and in disbelief what we found.
No military records support Kaufman's story. The red-haired officer and the sergeant can't be traced. The nurse's story can't be obtained firsthand. That doesn't faze a legend. The next stage is usually a carefully preserved piece of wreckage or genuine body part. It's time for the alien freak show. Those selling film of an alleged autopsy would have us believe it's true. For legal reasons, we can't show you the original. We've reconstructed it. With the help of ex-8th Air Force Colonel Dan McGovern, using the correct camera. In combat, he filmed the original Memphis Belle. He was the first military cameraman to film on the ground at Nagasaki. Much of that film is still classified. What does he think of the film of the alleged autopsy?
Well, from my point of view, I think that the whole setup is very amateur, to say the least.
Autopsies are well lit. The patient doesn't move. The cameras of the day are capable of good focus. Yet the autopsy tape is out of focus, overexposed in black and white. Wouldn't they use color?
It would be standard practice. As a matter of fact, color is highly recommended for all medical procedures, performing operations, and definitely so in autopsies.
The Bell and Howell camera weighs 7 pounds. The two cameras recommended would be on mounts, as is Discovery's. Ray Santilli, who sells the film worldwide, won't do an interview with us. He won't let Dan speak to the cameraman on the phone. He won't let Kodak test a single frame of the picture. Dan's seal of approval would confirm this as the most historic film ever shot. Proof that we are not alone. Santilli's version depends on the mystery cameraman stealing secret film. Is this possible?
It would be impossible to hide 20 rolls of film, especially if it was classified. It has to be accounted for.
Santilli claims the cameraman was flown in from Washington, D.C., 1,600 miles away. Is that likely?
Each Army Air Force base had its own base photo lab. They had the capability to process film, shoot film, and take care of anything that was on that particular base.
What about the name Santilli gave for the cameraman, Jack Barnett?
Jack Barnett. Never heard of him. Jack Barnett. Never heard the name. We cameramen are a very tight lot. We knew pretty well who the cameramen were in those early days. This is not what it seems to be. It's quite a hoax, and it's a phony.
We can unmask the forensic expert who studied the so-called autopsy film for discovery. A forensic pathologist, a veteran of over 20,000 autopsies, including air crashes. This is the first dummy he's dissected.
We have what is described as an alien. That is an absolutely earth-shattering event. It's never happened before, and it's going to be a long time before it happens again.
How would he go about his first alien?
If I was doing this post-mortem, I would have released all the neck structures from the mouth onwards, and then picked up the heart and lungs, taken it to a dissecting table, and then made a dissection. Instead of which, all I saw was somebody picking up a pair of scissors with index finger and thumb, which is certainly not the way any pathologist would use it, because, as you can see, it waves around like so, because you cannot guide it. Most pathologists would tend to use the thumb through one loop and the middle finger through the other loop, so that the index finger is available to guide it and steady it. What they were doing was they were just going inside, picking up an organ, snipping away almost without looking, and putting it into little trays and taking it away, almost like in a butcher's shop, basically, rather than a pathologist's mortuary. Now, it's bad enough if you were to do it in a human being whose anatomy we know reasonably well, but to do it on an alien who is the first ever, I think it's almost sacrilegious for it to be done in that manner. I think on the basis of what we have seen, I'm reasonably convinced that this was not an autopsy in the ordinary sense. It was probably fabricated, if you like.
If the stuffing's been knocked out of the aliens, there are fresh contenders in the far-fetched explanation stakes. Just 2 years before, enemy balloons caused the only wartime casualties on the mainland US. The Japanese released 9,000 across the Pacific. Astonishingly, press silence prevents the enemy from learning that a single one ever reaches the US. The paper balloons drop their bombs and self-destruct, but their secret is known. One imaginative theory has a renegade commander still launching them, or worse, a new model with a kamikaze crew. The plains of New Mexico hold other secrets in 1947. V-2 rockets. German technology captured at Peenemünde is being developed. Not without mistakes. One misguided missile nearly hits a town. Unsurprisingly, one suspect is the remnants of a rogue V-2 parachute and nose cone. Wilder speculation provides grimmer candidates for the alien corpses. monkeys used in later tests which do not survive. None of this resembles the material in General Ramey's office. Is there a simpler explanation? If $1 million report by the Air Force is to be believed, there is. Mac Brazel's debris is inspected not by Marcel alone. The Air Force traced the silent survivor who accompanies him. His sworn testimony maintains there is nothing alien about the wreckage. Other witnesses explain the cover-up to conceal the real purpose of the weather balloon. Alamogordo, New Mexico, the New York University Balloon Group, obscure academics, testing and refining balloons to remain at a fixed height. The sun makes ordinary balloons rise. They expand until they burst. The scientists try out new materials. To follow them, the engineers attach radar reflectors or targets.
The targets that we were using were constructed of aluminum foil laminated onto a fairly tough white paper, arranged in triangles with balsa wood stiffeners.
The expendable targets allow the balloon's height and speeds to be followed. Not all flights are recovered. One in particular stands out.
Flight number 4 was launched on the June the 4th, and it was tracked by the B-17 and by the radar. It passed out of radar range, and our last information on it, as I remember, was when it was over a little New Mexican town called Arabella with another little town of Blue Water, both of which were exotic places that lodged in my memory ever after. These little towns are 20 miles or so from where the debris was picked up sometime later. The debris that was found, as it was described by the rancher, Mac Brazel, is a quite good description of how the remnants of one of our flights would have appeared after it came back to Earth and dragged across the ground.
Most people are unfamiliar with radical new materials such as neoprene and polyethylene, and post-war shortages lead to improvisation.
The manufacturer reinforced the attachment of the reflective laminate to the balsa strips with some tape that the manufacturer happened to have in his shop. And curiously enough, the tape that he had was embossed with some odd flower-like designs. There were pinkish purple abstract designs.
The reason for the security clampdown is the balloon's true purpose. Amazingly, even many of the team are kept unaware. The balloons are intended to carry microphones to listen for the first Soviet atom bomb. The operation is classified Top Secret Priority 1A. Even the project name is hidden from them, Mogul.
To be truthful, I never heard the name Project Mogul until 1992. I did know the intrinsic purpose of what we were doing, that is trying to detect Soviet nuclear explosions, but I knew none of the military classification, and I had no need to know.
So much for alien hieroglyphics and magic materials. One other thing in General Ramey's office remains to be identified, a heap of strange dark pieces. Thanks to Discovery, weatherman Irving Newton today meets Professor Moore for the first time. Together, can they complete the puzzle?
How do you do, Professor Moore? I've been looking forward to this.
I have to. Come in, let me show you what we have.
I sure would be happy to.
On our flights, we used these corner reflecting radar targets to track the balloons, and you may have seen these before. Have you seen these?
That surely looks like it, except this one is whole. The one we saw there was just in shatters.
We had 3 of these on the flight that we launched back in June that went to Arabella. And we carried them on balloons like this. We had strings of 23 of these balloons, The interesting thing here is after this neoprene gets exposed to sunlight, it darkens and discolors, and after it's been exposed to sunlight for a day or so, it gets about this dark, and after it's been 2 or 3 weeks out in the sun, it gets to be like this. Did you see this in General Ramey's office?
Absolutely. You've made a perfect explanation of the whole thing. All of this is what was in General Ramey's office. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what we saw.
There are cases where material has been found and analyzed. Vladivostok, one of the former Soviet Union's key naval ports. Not far away lies what's claimed to be the site of the crash of an alien probe. To take us there, we've enlisted the help of an expert on Russian UFOs, TV journalist George Knapp.
Well, we're on our way to Dalnogorsk, and 10 years ago, this journey wouldn't have been possible. For one thing, it's a very remote site. It's the reason we're in this commandeered military helicopter. It's the only way to get there. Plus the fact that politically 10 years ago when the crash occurred, if we had gone to Vladivostok, taken pictures of their harbor and all the military secrets there, we could have been shot or imprisoned. So this is basically the only way to get there. We're going there to find out if the crash at Dalnogorsk is the equivalent of the Russian Roswell, because it has all the elements. It has eyewitnesses, scientific testimony, UFO sightings, scientific analysis of the material. We'll see what we find out.
The crash of an unknown object in Dalnogorsk, Siberia in January 1986 raises many questions. What is the silent 2-meter sphere which flies through the area parallel to the ground? It travels at only 40 miles an hour. It can hardly be a natural phenomenon like a meteorite, a fallen satellite or rocket part. Do the traces really point to extraterrestrial technology? Are the scientific tests on the debris as conclusive as is claimed? The heavy metal works of the town are overlooked by the simply named Height 611. Witnesses observe the strange sphere fly towards the ridge. It rises and falls near the crest before crashing in flames.
It is red and orange. It changes colour at different times. When it is rising, it becomes brighter, and when it is falling, it gets darker. When it climbs, rays of light come out of it.
It happens on the 29th of January 1986. We see a strange object. It is bright yellow. It looks like the sun. It is travelling parallel to the ground. A single large beam of light comes out of it. Then it disappears over the hill.
I don't hear any explosion and I don't see any flash. Yet after it goes up and down several times, it vanishes over the hill.
A final question. What do you think it was? Any idea?
A UFO.
Subsequent searches find the impact site. Mysterious materials, balls, gauzes, netting are removed from the hillside. They remain in the hands of national science academies. Local scientists have only small samples. Over 3 years, they compile a 300-page study. Its author points to anomalous features of the case.
At the crash site, I found bits of magnetized flint and about 300 grams of different materials. After the crash at Height 611, there were many UFO sightings over Dalnogorsk. Discs, balloon shapes, single lights. It looked as though they were looking for something because they had searchlights. This searchlight was very interesting. It only lit up what it touched. It had no visible beam. Everything leads me to believe that this object was made by highly intelligent beings and was of extraterrestrial origin.
The metallic wreckage contains extraordinary levels of elements, purer than on Earth, he says. The net-like material is quartz insulation round gold wires, thinner than a human hair. What came from the sky is, he argues, not something made here. but part of the guidance system of an extraterrestrial probe. No other Russian researchers have published their findings or released any of the material. This is one secret Moscow could share with the scientific community. Before it becomes a myth, we could have an answer.
Unlike most UFO cases, this one should be and can be resolved. Russian institutes have sequestered the Dalnogorsk debris for more than 10 years. The world has been told the object was of terrestrial origin. But where are the reports? And more importantly, where is the debris itself? The only scientific analysis released to date suggests the object, whatever it was made somewhere else and is perhaps not of this world.
It's not a landing on the White House lawn. It's the next best thing. At RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, Suffolk, England, home to American tank busters. In December 1980, US Air Force personnel encounter a touchdown of a different kind. An internal US Air Force memo confirms the incident. Its author is writing from first-hand experience.
In 1980, I was assigned to RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. It was a combination twin base complex. I was assigned as the deputy base commander. On the evening of the 29th of December, we were having the Combat Support Group Christmas party. We'd just finished dinner when the police lieutenant on duty came in just white as a sheet and said, "I've got to talk to you and the base commander right now." And he said, "It's back." We looked at each other and looked at him and said, "What's back?" He said, "You know, the UFO, it's back."
3 days beforehand, there is a sighting witnessed by many security police.
We crossed Bentwaters, not the back gate, to the Woodbridge base. We proceeded on into the forest to the area where this supposed landing had taken place several nights earlier. There were 3 indentations in the forest, equal distance apart. So I had the disaster preparedness NCO start to take readings. While we were in the process of getting readings, which by the way came out much higher than background radiation, somebody noticed something in the forest, a light. The light was bright like the sun. It was glowing, but it had a dark center, and it appeared to have something dripping off it like molten metal. The light was about 15 or 20 degrees off to our left, almost directly in front of a farmer's field. As we approached the fence, the edge of the field, and were watching this object, it suddenly exploded. Now, there was never a sound the whole time. It burst suddenly into 5 objects, 5 white objects, and disappeared. And at that time, we noticed there were several objects in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south. They were brightly lit, multicolored, and they were moving very rapidly together as though they were in formation. We watched them for several minutes, and they kept doing this. We turned and watched the object to the south, and suddenly it came toward us at very high speed. It stopped and sent down a beam like a laser beam. It fell right at our feet. It stayed on for several seconds, and just like a flashlight, it clicked off. Managed to get a bit of communication through to the command post and asked them to check with Eastern Radar, who had air defense for that sector. They came back and said no, they weren't painting anything on the screen, but they couldn't explain and wouldn't say a whole lot more. I never saw anything as far as an alien being or anything could be considered human or humanoid or anything of that nature. Although I had a distinct feeling, in fact, I'm firmly convinced that the objects we saw were under some type of intelligent control.
3 days earlier, patrolmen make physical contact with a UFO.
I was called at the Charles Halt to go out to the East Gate. It was about 12 o'clock at night, and I proceeded out there. When I arrived there, there was 2 police units there. They were pointing over into the wooded area, about 300 yards approximately off the East Gate. We seen a glowing white light with some yellow and some blue in it. It was, the closer we got, the more intense the bright white light emulated out of it. We got to the edge of the forest, and it was bright enough to make you squint. We were approximately about 60, 70 yards away from the craft. As I got maybe within 10 meters of the craft, it was apparent that there was no aircraft that I've seen. It was triangular in shape, like a pyramid, about 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet, approximately about 6, 7 feet tall. The fabric of the craft was a very smooth, black glass-type fabric. Underneath the craft, there was what appeared to be some type of landing struts or landing gear, and they left a triangle impression in the ground. The colors that were still moderately covering the edges of it were red, blue, and yellow. As I proceeded up to the craft and got beside of it, I noticed a writing of some sort or description of some sort on the side of the craft. Undecipherable. I didn't know what it was. The craft itself was warm. I observed the craft probably for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the ground, checking it out, encircling it. Then about 15 minutes later, the craft started moving back towards the trees and the woods, back through the woods. And it probably went back probably about 200 feet. We never really got really close to it again. The craft raised up through the trees, and in a blink of an eye, it was gone. What I seen was a controlled aircraft that could fly. Made no sound, and was able to go ahead and maneuver back through the woods and be able to take off in a blink of an eye. That's what I seen. Do we have the capability in the United States Air Force? No. Does anybody else in the world? Not as far as I know of.
Alien craft or terrestrial cover-ups? Products of distant planets or of our own imagination? Time for science to bring the answers down to Earth? Wobbling and flipping, faster than any known planes. Amazed, the pilot lands. Kenneth Arnold's sighting begins a new age. Word spreads. The press name them flying saucers. Reports multiply.
Guns, tanks, bombs, they're like toys against them.
Fictional generals fear space invaders. Real-life commanders fear this world at war. They dread panic.
Looks like they're gonna come out of that gully pretty soon.
Even a 1938 dramatization has caused chaos. It forces an apology from its producer, Orson Welles.
Extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips and adventure stories should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
Nor do the military have answers. They haven't been able to resolve the mystery of UFOs seen over Europe in the last months of World War II by US night fighter crews, who dubbed them Foo Fighters.
The sightings we saw were, I think, were in about in the 44, in November or December then. We'd see these balls of light that would fly off the wings of our airplane. The one I saw was like a white light. A lot of the other people reporting in it saw red lights, and some of them would see some green lights, and some of them reported that they would try to chase one while they never could catch it.
We'd turn into it, and it would turn with us. And we'd turn away from it, and it would still turn with us. And I put my gun sights on, trying to get on it, but I never could.
We flew the British Mosquito, which was capable of 450 knots. And
We opened it up a number of times and tried to close with it, and we never came anywhere close to it.
A German secret weapon? False images in pilots' eyes? Natural phenomena? Investigations drew a blank.
I think the book is open on whether it was imagination, hallucination, or really extraterrestrial or German ground-controlled object. But I haven't seen anything in 50 years that changed the perception of what they were other than unidentified flying objects.
Foo Fighters end with the war. Other sightings continue. Life in post-war America appears tranquil. But national security is still at stake. Is the US under Soviet aerial surveillance? Could Big Brother be watching? UFO sightings are most disturbing near sensitive sites. Atomic secrets are at risk. The threat of nuclear war raises the stakes. Soviet agents and communist subversives could be anywhere. Any one may be an alien. They look like us.
Say, could you tell me what... Yes, comrade. Nothing. Nothing, never mind.
UFO reports and rare witnesses films do not go to the police or scientists. For 22 years, they're collected for Air Force investigation, always with the two aims described by Project Blue Book's first head.
First of all, to try to determine if the UFO phenomena presents a threat to the security of the United States. And second, to determine if the UFO phenomena exhibits any technological advances which could be channeled into research and development.
In 1969, the files are closed. The Air Force conclusion, no threat and poor data.
They looked at 3,201 sightings. They categorized every single one. They did a quality evaluation of every single one. And what they found was 21% of the 3,201 cases that they examined had to be listed as unknowns, completely separate and distinct from the 10% that were listed as insufficient information. They found that the better the quality of the sighting, the more likely to be an unknown. And yet, what did the Secretary of the Air Force say to the public? He said that on the basis of this report, we believe that no objects such as those popularly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States.
Believers wait for signs. Skeptics want the ultimate proof. At last it comes.
I was absolutely thrilled. To me, this was one of the great moments in my research.
The leaked papers British researcher Tim Good receives in 1987 seem the answer. The above top-secret documents concern US government contacts with aliens. Those in charge are named the Majestic 12. The papers are for President-elect Eisenhower. They reveal the recovery of aliens in New Mexico in 1947. A flying saucer crashes. A local rancher reports finding it 75 miles northwest of Roswell Army Airfield. The wreckage is unrecognizable. No wires or conventional parts. During the recovery, 4 dead aliens are found. News of the crash gets out. The remains are removed to several different locations for analysis. An effective cover story given out. civilian witnesses are debriefed.
There was no question that the importance of these documents was monumental. I mean, nothing like it before had surfaced.
It's dynamite. Proves there are flying saucers, alien visitors, the whole business. The implication is, one, Earth is being visited by extraterrestrial spacecraft. Two, the government has known not only that that is true in the abstract, but has had pieces of wreckage and bodies of extraterrestrials since at least 1947.
Within about 10 minutes of seeing the documents, based upon my research into UFO documents up to that time, I knew these things weren't real.
Critics believe it's a clever forgery with a damning detail lifted from a later genuine letter, the signature of President Truman.
Now, anyone familiar with forensic document analysis knows that a person signing their name never signs it twice in the exact same way. And that suggested to us that the signature from the later genuine non-UFO document was cut out by the forger and pasted onto this false executive order to lend an air of authenticity to it.
They say the signature on there is identical to another signature from a different memo, which I found in the first place. I say if you hold them up to a light table, they are clearly not identical.
Former supporters now believe it's a con. For them, the copy is too exact.
For me, the clincher is that lifted signature. However, let me say I am convinced that whoever fabricated that document, if it was fabricated, must have had inside knowledge. There's no way it could be otherwise. And there's no question that the Majestic 12 papers have indeed pointed people in the right direction. And I think essentially the information contained therein is accurate.
To get a good view of government UFO files, one group goes to court. The National Security Agency protests in an affidavit. The judge refuses to let them read the contents.
We filed for the 21-page above top secret affidavit. The judge had referenced it in his finding, and we eventually got it. The only trouble is, as you start to go through it, you find that it's blacked out, and pretty soon all blacked out. 75% of the document isn't there, and people say, scrape away the black, there's nothing underneath. They Xerox it first.
In the eyes of the state, there is no need to know why there is no need to know.
The cover-up alone is proven by the released documents, released by agencies such as the FBI, who denied any involvement in UFO research until the Freedom of Information Act showed that they'd been lying. They released 1,100 pages of documents. CIA denied any interest in the subject. Suddenly we have now, I would think, thousands of pages of UFO-related information dating back to the 1940s, which quite clearly indicates that there has been a cover-up.
100,000 cases are archived at the private Center for UFO Studies. Mainstream science ignores them.
I am convinced by over 20 years of work in this field that there is a mysterious phenomenon occurring that is being neglected by science, not by the public, but by science. And it's to science's detriment that it's doing so.
The data gather dust. Elsewhere, governments launch more active studies. The former Soviet Union, March 1990. Interceptors scramble to investigate pulsing lights northeast of Moscow. For 3.5 hours, they stalk the UFO, which moves at speeds up to 3,000 miles an hour. No radar image appears on the screens of ground stations. Thermal imaging produces results. The UFO is photographed. The secret results are proof for the Chief of Air Defense Forces.
This 1990 case is the only one supported by evidence.
All other possible contact reports by both civil and military aircraft are merely eyewitness accounts. This is the only case for which there is concrete proof.
His pilots do not fire on UFOs.
As far as official instructions are concerned, we in air defense have certain unwritten rules that mean we only use radar and not armaments against UFOs.
Nor are personnel seeing Western stealth planes.
We never thought it was American stealth aircraft. The radar characteristics are not the same. Stealth behaves like a plane in terms of speed and maneuverability. UFOs are very different.
Their files list many cases. This pilot finds a light closing on him. There's contact. The aircraft goes into a rapid descent. On landing, there's damage to the left wing. From 1977 on, an official Ministry of Defense study collects hundreds of reports. They hope to gain alien technology for military use. The covert research continues. Is this a UFO or smoke from a gunnery exercise? Mass observation of UFOs is nothing new in the East. Is this UFO a balloon? Never before seen in the West, this amateur footage purports to show a UFO over the parliament in Vilnius, capital of Lithuania. It hovers noiselessly, appearing to land. It moves unlike a normal helicopter or plane. At dawn the next morning, local militia video this nearby. Enhanced, the night visitor looks like this. Hundreds of people see a giant UFO over the city of Petrozavodsk in northwest Russia in 1977. Hasty studies establish that it's an optical phenomenon, the burning booster rocket from the secret launch of a man-made satellite. At the Soviet Academy of Sciences, such phenomena are considered worthy of serious inquiry. In addition to the country's military study, the governing body for academic research coordinates the countrywide collection of information for scientific analysis. The building houses the Central Committee for the Study of UFOs, which gathers data from 10 other scientific academies.
We carry out research in two ways. One is passive. We analyze UFO reports. The other way is active. For some sightings, we carry out investigations in the field.
12 years of research are carried out at this site. Train passengers see a UFO approach. They say a metallic craft landed here. Biologist Professor Simyakov believes there are permanent changes to the scene.
This is the landing place where we carried out some interesting tests. We did experiments in both physics and biology.
His experiments find living creatures shun these spots. Divining rods find unusual spiral energy patterns at UFO landing sites. 20 years of studies produce similar results. From the early days on, the ground inside is empty of all life, even microbes. According to his measurements, inside the circles, time speeds up. Most puzzling of all, Earth samples taken from landing sites contain tiny spheres. His work leads him to conclude these are extraterrestrial, containing DNA, the seed of life itself. Tests in America are divided, either of unknown origin or common parts of filter systems. Yet some Russian researchers believe alien microtechnology is being placed here by interplanetary prowlers. Kenneth Arnold's sighting over Washington State is a close encounter of the first kind. The object is seen, but no more. Where traces are left, these are the second kind. Now come close encounters of the third kind, where people observe aliens throughout the world. There are close encounters of a fourth kind. In these, the witness interacts with the aliens. Todmorden, England. In November 1980, an experienced police officer, Alan Godfrey, is on night patrol.
I was on a 10-6 night duty, so I decided that I would go up to this local council estate. As I was about to turn, I saw another 500 yards up the road, this object. As I got near to this object, it became apparent to me that what I was looking at wasn't something that I would normally find in the early hours of the morning in Todmorden, you know. I thought it could have been a hot air balloon that had come down, but obviously as I got nearer and nearer, I realised that this was a metallic, man-made craft. It was a nuts and bolts thing. It wasn't an hallucination, it was real. This object was 20 foot wide. It's 14 feet high. It's diamond-shaped. The bottom half of it was rotating. The top half was stationary. It had a bank of dark windows, or could have been panelling. I got out the car, picked a brick up, and throwing it at it, and I probably found out whether the windows or not. The trees that lined the road were shaking violently. There was leaves and branches flying all over the place. Yet, whilst I was sat in the car, I didn't feel any vibration. And I didn't hear any noise. But I certainly wasn't going to get out of the car. I picked my clipboard up, put it on my knee, and proceeded to draw it. Now, as I'm drawing the object, I'm suddenly at the other side of it, driving a police car. And the object had gone.
Gone too is a period of time. After hypnotic regression, the officer can remember more.
There's a total blackness. Then there's a feeling of floating, as though either me on my own or the vehicle, whatever, is floating. Then I wake up in a room. Now, in this room, there is a very tall humanoid, for want of a better word. He's about 6 foot to 6'6", very tall, thin, with a beard. He had a skull cap on and he had this white gown on. What happens then is I'm asked to get on this bed. Now, the questions asked to me then is, how did he, you know, he wants to get on? Because I said, well, his mouth's not moving, he's not talking, it's just, he wants me to get on the bed. Obviously, whatever it was having some sort of influence over my thoughts. Yet, I did feel at ease with him. I felt comfortable with him. I got the impression that I'd met him before. I wasn't in fear of him or anything like that. I didn't feel in any danger. So I'm on the bed, And these horrible little things come. They are a lamp-shaped head with black, dark eyes. That's the best way I can describe them. And there was about 7 or 8 of them.
Officers nearby spot a light in the sky. The constable remains convinced his encounter is genuine. Natural or unnatural explanation? Does a UFO land and search the area? Or is it an unlikely coincidence? Fireball meteor and simultaneous earthquake.
Well, I have no idea what had happened. I don't think it was an earthquake somehow. You know, I still think it wasn't an earthquake.
John Roberts isn't the only one shaken by events. Out on the hills, Hugh Edwards sees a flying saucer.
I saw this object come in along the mountain with the size of a bus, really. It's white in the middle, on the lens. Came across the mountain towards the road there. As it went over there, it dipped, and I thought it was going to crash. It dipped out of sight into the valley. Well, I'd heard so much about flying saucers, and I thought, well, this is it. And the only sound I heard of it, like a shh, going through the air. I was very surprised to see it, really.
In the village of Llandrithro, the district nurse thinks a plane is down.
I thought there might be an air crash. Maybe, as a nurse, we could help giving first aid. So I called to my daughters, and we got into the car, and we made our way up to the mountain. We drove a fair way along the mountain road, and to our left, we could see a huge orange ball sitting on the mountain, glowing.
Yeah, we stopped and we started looking what we thought was going to be an aircraft on fire.
So we'd envisaged sort of, oh God, you know, there might be bodies if it was an aeroplane crash, and we weren't too happy at that prospect, but we were quite surprised to see this big reddish orange ball just sitting there.
There were no flames, and it was so uniform. The shape, the round spherical shape of it made us realise we weren't looking at an aircraft. There were no flames jumping, but it was pulsating, this red-orange object that we saw.
And we could see little lights, like fairy lights, coming towards the object in a zigzag pattern, and we assumed at that time possibly there was someone going to see what was what.
With hindsight, we realised that the search party couldn't have got there, located it and got there in the time it had taken us to go from the village up to the mountain.
Yeah.
No one could have organised themselves to get to the object that we saw.
No search party went out that night, and nothing is ever found at the scene. One astronomer takes a particular interest. Ron Madison can usually only study meteorites in the sky. Here's a chance to get information at close quarters, both from witnesses and from what he assumes is an impact.
Thinking that that explosion might well have been due to an impacting piece of rock, our first reaction was to try to estimate the energy involved. And it seemed to us to be something that would correspond to an explosion of the size of about 600 tons of TNT.
No local RAF plane is missing. No trace can be found. A weird light phenomenon in the Bala Mountains.
We got letters from as far apart as Penzance and Northern Ireland and Derby, all reporting seeing a bright light, maybe comparable with a half moon in brilliance, moving across the sky at the speed of an aircraft, but with no sound, and trailing smoke, just like you would expect something on fire to be crashing. In the next few days, we were to realize, of course, that the village was not very far from the Bala Fault, which is active and has been moving steadily over thousands of years. And unbeknown to us at the time, originally, there had been on that evening a movement on the fault, and that is incontrovertible evidence. This was a coincidence. There were fireballs in the sky at the same time that there was a triggered movement along the Bala Fault. That may be the only link.
Gulf Breeze, Florida, November 1987. A surprise visit on Remembrance Day. From a UFO 3 times as big as a house. Just for the memory, builder Ed Walters takes Polaroids of it. For him, it's the first of many such photo opportunities near abductions and glimpses of aliens. Enough to sell 2 books. The UFO world is littered with hoaxers. Ed is a prime suspect. He won't let us show his pictures or do a critical interview. Gulf Breeze is for the faithful only. Shoreline Park, just across the bay from a naval air station, under civilian flight paths. In this quiet backwater, the sightings become big news locally.
We published the first pictures of the Gulf Breeze sightings back in November of 1987, and I was trying to figure out exactly how to present them, because I tried to run everything that happened locally in Gulf Breeze. When my folks came in, and I said, "You're not going to believe what we're getting ready to run in the paper this week." And I showed them the pictures, and they said, "That's what we saw." It was primarily because of the many other people in Gulf Breeze that witnessed the UFO, both the same night that Ed first got the pictures and many times after that, that the Sentinel continued to carry the story.
I have had 3 other daylight sightings and over 100 sightings at night at Shoreline Park in Gulf Breeze.
I witnessed over 170 sightings. These were red lights, red and white lights, over and around Gulf Breeze, Florida.
I've seen a silver flying dome in the sky that was unidentifiable. Never seen anything like that before, and it was unexplainable.
One explanation which occurs to locals is that some of the sightings are illegal pranks, perhaps by high-spirited ratings from the naval base at Pensacola. Another possibility is that this is an area full of civil and military air traffic. Weird and wonderful craft may be in use. eyes in the sky. Would most people recognize UAVs? Uninhabited aerial vehicles designed for stealthy reconnaissance and secret observation. Photographs such as these are not difficult to fake if you're an investigative reporter with a little know-how, a styrofoam model, and the right camera.
It was quite easy to reproduce these pictures. He took the majority of his early pictures, about 30 pictures, on a Polaroid 108 camera. It is very easy to double expose the film in that camera. If you don't pull the film out, you can press the button and expose that same piece of film again. You take a picture of the UFO model inside, you go outside, take a picture of the skyline, let the film develop. There you have your double exposure of a UFO flying in the sky.
What does a photo analyst make of Ed's photos? Bruce Maccabee is a government research physicist. He's a believer in UFOs. He's the author of many scientific papers on them. His calculations satisfy him that this is no hoax.
I have analyzed all the films and videos that have been taken by Ed Walters. I have studied most of the videos, I guess, that have been taken by other people down there.
And it's just sitting there.
As far as Ed's pictures and videos are concerned, it's my opinion that they are real. I've analyzed these very carefully, taking into account all the criticisms that have been leveled against them, and have found reasons to reject the criticisms.
In baseball, you get 3 strikes and you're out. For Ed Walters, in this case, strike 1 was when a model was found in the attic of his former home. Strike 2 was when a young man named Tommy Smith came forward and claimed that he was an eyewitness to Ed Walters creating double-exposed UFO pictures. Strike 3 was when we went out and did photo experiments and were able to replicate many of these photos, especially the difficult photos like the UFO hovering over the road. So my conclusion is 3 strikes and you're out.
In the Florida skies and worldwide, people keep on looking. To be in tune with something outside ourselves. Searching for a sign, for hope, even salvation. It's increasingly reasonable to believe we are not alone in the universe. New planets have been discovered in the last year. One, almost as big as Jupiter, by the 4th star nearest to the Sun. A planet orbiting star 51 in the constellation of Pegasus, and the giants near PSR 1257 plus 12. The latest estimate of the number of galaxies is now 50 billion. The number of detectable civilizations we might expect is 100 million. It's a pity our world is in the back of beyond. Only a handful of stars could have heard us yet. We may hear ET phoning first. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, is listening out.
I made the first modern radio search in 1960. All over the world, large radio telescopes were being constructed because the beauty and power of radio astronomy had just been recognized. And also at that time, some very much more sensitive radio receivers were invented. The combination of these new telescopes and these new radio receivers gave us a sensitivity very much greater than we've had before. And this was a first. We had, in our abilities, crossed a very important threshold. So it made sense to search. It didn't require anything special in the activities of the extraterrestrials. If they were just like us, we could detect them. Conducting a SETI search from the Earth's surface is very challenging and very difficult. And the reason is you detect intelligent signals all the time. It's just they're all from us.
Have we ever detected an intelligent signal from another world? This man may have. Jerry Amon. At Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope, bigger than 3 football fields. From near the center of the galaxy, from a fixed source. An on-off signal 30 times stronger than the background, heard on a single channel.
We had started a data run on August 15th, 1977 that lasted for about 3 days. As I was looking through the printout, I was recording and marking all of those signals that were unusually strong, and I came across one that was stronger than I'd ever seen before by many times. And I was so astonished that I wrote the word "wow!" exclamation point over in the margin without even thinking. To have signals coming in only one channel indicates the possibility that this was some either unique astronomical event or that it was generated by some transmitter. We are resurveying the sky using more modern equipment, and we have passed through that same region of the sky and have not seen the WOW source again.
They check their equipment and their figures. Studies eliminate bugs and glitches, stars, space probes, and terrestrial sources.
We have ruled out effectively nearby spacecraft or space debris or satellites in Earth orbit, and we've certainly ruled out anything close, very close to the radio telescope, like an airplane flying through the beam of the telescope. We have not ruled out the possibility that this is actually a signal from extraterrestrial intelligence.
Even if they can detect us, are there ways of covering the vast distances of space? Scientists have some exotic answers. Wormholes, for example.
If you imagine that this balloon is our universe, we live in 3 dimensions in the surface of the balloon. And it has been suggested that there may be what are called wormholes, that, if you like, sort of run across the balloon from one side to the other, or connecting points, which would allow us to travel from one side of the balloon via a shortcut to the other side of the balloon.
How about warping space?
Imagine that this sheet of paper is our universe, and we're at point A and we want to go to point B. Normally, we would have to travel through from A to B through the universe. What would be nice, of course, would be if we could find some way of bending the universe in another dimension to bring those 2 points together and then step across the gap. And that's a sort of space warp, if you like, warping the universe to bring those points closer together.
The answer remains theoretical. For us, we are limited to sending probes into nearby space to gather information, to photograph and measure atmospheric conditions. Could others be doing that too? The most fervent UFO believers say it's already happening. They claim footage taken on board the shuttle Discovery in September 1991 shows an alien craft taking evasive action from one of our missiles. The space battle has commenced. Watch again as the intergalactic invaders engage warp drive and alter course in the blink of an eye. Obviously, the force is not with us. There is another explanation.
And in fact, the very same physical process that caused the space battle is behind the comet that's overhead tonight. The brightest comet in the last 20 years. Now, how does a comet relate to this space battle photographed from the shuttle? Well, the comet is a rocky object with a lot of ices. And when it comes in near to the sun, the heat from the sun causes the ice to sublimate, to turn into vapor. Now, this produces forces on the comet which tweak its orbit and make it very hard to predict the orbit of a comet. The shuttle carries 5, 6, 7 people into space every time it goes up. And those people in the shuttle do exactly what we do on the ground. They breathe, they eat, they drink, and they eliminate. They use the bathroom. The shuttle accumulates all this wastewater. Periodically, it dumps the wastewater overboard. When you dump off this wastewater and it turns into ice, what's going to happen to it? When you come into a part of the orbit where that ice can be hit by the sun, now you've got all these little ice crystals. They're hit by the sun, they start to sublimate. That is, they go from solid ice to gas. When that happens, it creates a jet. That creates a force. In essence, a little mini rocket engine. Much like on the comet that we've seen, but it's certainly not a space battle from, you know, creatures from Zeta Reticuli or wherever.
Our probe Pioneer is leaving the solar system. What would ET's probe look like? Perhaps like this meteorite seen by the Spacewatch team at Kitt Peak, Arizona. In 1991, by chance, they spot a potential alien craft. Possibly an alien space probe on a reconnaissance mission. "10,000 could pass each year. We would be lucky to notice a single one. So we watch and wait and wonder." What can we trust? There are great cases.
The fabric of the craft was a very smooth, black glass type.
There are convincing eyewitnesses.
It was a UFO.
Is there any hard data? There is one new, fascinating report. On May the 5th, 1984, an alert was triggered at the North American Air Defense Command. Moving hot and fast through Earth orbit, it was not an incoming missile. It was codenamed Fast Walker. Floating in Earth orbit are the satellites operated by the US Defense Support Program. Their job is to provide the first warning of an incoming ballistic missile attack on the United States. The satellite sensors are so delicate that they also pick up infrared heat signals, even ones from minor house fires. At 1400 hours Zulu time, a DSP satellite detected a hot, fast, solid object swept in from outer space. It passed within 15 miles of the satellite and then curved back out into deep space. It was tracked for 9 minutes. A top-secret summary of the Fast Walker shows the time and place of the incident, the infrared signature of the object, and its track through Earth orbit. It was leaked to a UFO investigator.
Where it appeared in the sensor field would indicate that the object came into the sensor field from outer space, went in front of the sensor, and left, departing back into deep space. It would indicate that it was some type of craft that had the ability to maneuver.
If this Fast Walker was a meteorite, then the Earth's gravitational field would have sucked it into the atmosphere, burning it up. It takes energy to break the grip of Earth's gravity. Inanimate objects like meteors or space junk can't do this. Spacecraft like the Space Shuttle can. But the Fast Walker came from outer space.
And there you have hard evidence. You have telemetry from that satellite. You have information. You have systems. You have data that you can go back and investigate and check and verify. In the past, usually UFO events are just eyewitness testimony. There you have a very sensitive defense system that sent you the information to the ground. I don't even know if you can solve it. Maybe it's one of those enigmas that's just going to be with us forever. You know, what type of craft would have that ability? And some people might say a UFO.
Is anyone out there? An astronomer has estimated the number of civilizations likely to have existed in the universe. You take the rate of star formation in a galaxy and the fraction of stars with planets. Estimate the proportion of planets which could support life, Calculate the fraction of living things which become civilizations. Work out how long before those civilizations become detectable. Guess how long a civilization lasts. Don't forget that some civilizations can be short-lived. Multiply all those figures by the number of galaxies in the universe, and you get 100 million civilizations since the universe began.